Get into the action all summer long. Listen to that. Summer. Woo! The season's over. The NHL season's over. The NBA season's over. But there's still lots happening at Sports Interaction, including tennis, golf, whatever it is you're into, baseball, all happening right now at sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. And remember, everything's you can do before games, live and play all summer long. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. It's 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. If you can write a review, we'd really appreciate it. Helps us a lot. You can also watch us on YouTube as well. And you can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. It's emergency pod time, everybody, because we got some news coming out of Formula One. As the Alpine F1 team, well, they parted ways with Team Principal Otmar Szafneur and Sporting Director Alan Permane following the conclusion to this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix. Now, the team will also be losing their Chief Technical Officer, Pat Fry. He's moving down to Williams to take that same position down there. So these are massively big names that are being let go or being let walk away from Alpine. Unbelievable stuff. So if we go back through a bit of a timeline, we'll see if I can nail these dates properly. It's around 19 days ago. Bruno Famine was promoted to the vice president of Alpine Motorsports and was put in charge of, leading all of the company's motorsport endeavors, which also included the Formula One team as well. And Otmar Szafnauer, well, he was to report to Famine, who would then report to, at the time, the group CEO, Laurent Rossi. But before Famine, Szafnauer was communicating directly to Laurent Rossi, reporting directly to Laurent Rossi. And now they had added Famine in between the two of them. So that chain of command. Alpine said then in a statement that the change was a step to simplify and reinforce that chain of communication, done, quote, through the creation of functional hubs is what they had called it. So Famine's roles were to be heading up all of motorsports divisions for Alpine, so that they participate in Formula One, endurance racing, customer car racing, their Alpine Academy as well. And there's no question it's been a very tough start to the season for the Alpine F1 team. I mean, currently, at the time of recording this, there's 6 in the constructor standings. At the beginning of the season, the goal was to capture that P4. Again, maybe do a little bit better, maybe try to push for that P3 like they had done in 2022, fighting and wrestling P4 from McLaren. The team was looking at the start of 2023 as themselves being very competitive. But once, they hit the track in Bahrain, they hadn't made as big of a step as I think they were hoping to. Then seeing just how much of a step Aston Martin had made and continued to make at the beginning of the season. And then you fast forward to May at the Miami Grand Prix and the team struggling, and team boss, or Laurent Rossi, I should say. So the CEO, Laurent Rossi, furious with the team's lack of performance, saying that, there were, some in the team that, not the drivers, that were not trying hard enough and lacking motivation. I think that was directed towards more of the upper brass at the team. Rossi did, however, confirm to F1.com that the Renault group, so the ones that basically own Alpine, would not pull the plug on their commitment to Formula One just because they were struggling, and the team would stay, and they were committed to Formula One. They were committed to this project. They were committed to racing in Formula One. So Renault has been, giving a lot of financial support to the team, probably close to, hundreds of millions of dollars for the cars, the development of them, the development of the engines, the internal workings within the factory, because factory needs to be upgraded as well. And then I think for them, they also see what Aston Martin has done in the off season and are probably wondering, why that's not them, because Aston Martin, they don't have the infrastructure at the time that Alpine has. They don't have the workforce that Alpine has. And yet here this team, Aston Martin team, is, beating them and beating a lot of the teams out there. So I think Rossi had that time, warned the team, if there were no signs of improvement, then there would be some consequences. And the trajectory, as he called it, wasn't good that the team was on. So I think for the Alpine F1 team, they began to turn this form around a bit. So they started to score some points. Ocon had that big podium in Monaco and kind of seemed like they were, turning a corner and starting to be competitive and looking more like the Alpine team that we'd seen in 2022. But then, poor performances followed again. Canada, just a P8 for Ocon. Austria, I think Gasly just squeaked into the points, while Ocon, I think he languished in like P14. British Grand Prix, both DNFs. Hungary again, both drivers crashing into each other, DNFing again. So now, just over a week ago, Laurent Rossi, who was the CEO at Alpine, so he was moved over to a role in special projects at Renault. And in comes Felipe Creef. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. Don't quote me on it. But for Rossi, I think a big part of his project's role is to oversee development, but then also the implementation of a few of the Alpine road cars, getting newer versions of Alpine road cars out into the market. So with that change, of hierarchy at the team, it was Creef, Bruno Famin, who would report to Creef, and then underneath him is Otmar Szafneur. So Szafnauer, again, having to go through Bruno Famin to get to the CEO or whatever, that communication chain. But since, Creef has really just gone and cleaned house here by, letting go of Szafnauer and Permane and letting Pat Fry, be snapped up by Williams. I mean, that's a top line talent right there as well. So it's just it's a laundry list, or a revolving door, I should say, at the team, for almost a few years here. I mean, if you go back to, I want to say like Daniel Ricciardo, obviously a big name, but he leaves. Why is he leaving, right? So he just leaves the group, leaves Renault, goes to McLaren, and then Cyril Abiteboul, team boss for quite a while at that team, gone around January 2021. Marcin Budkowski and Alain Prost, who was in this non-executive director role, is kind of weird. Beginning of 2022, both of them gone. And that was sort of a weird tier system that they had worked out within the team. It was quite odd. Fernando Alonso came and went. Oscar Piastri, gone. Then now we've got Laurent Rossi moved to special projects. Szafnauer, gone. Alan Permane, gone. Pat Fry, gone. So all of these, relatively fairly big names within this group. And, Famin had this to say on Friday that, Szafnauer and Permane, they weren't, how did he put it? They weren't on the same line or on the same timeline, I believe he called it. And, quote, we have a different view of the way of doing it. And so I think a lot of that has to do with Otmar and Permane's and everyone's vision of how long it was going to take Alpine to get back to their winning ways. Back to the time of Renault when they were winning those championships. But I think if you look at that Renault team from those years when they were winning those championships with Fernando Alonso, that was a very special time because I don't believe Renault had too much hands-on to do with the team, right? Flavio Briatore took care of a lot of things at that team. Alonso was surrounded by a very strong group. There weren't many people making the decisions there. There were only a few voices. It was a tight, collaborative effort. And, look what they were able to achieve with that team. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. For Alan Permane, he's a very competent motorsports person. He's been at that team for has to be over 30 years. He's been there for a very long time. Our Otmar only, given a few years, not even that at this team. I just don't feel that that's enough because I think for a team principal to put their stamp on a team, it takes a few years. There's a lot of things internally that you have to get to your liking. It's like a head coach and they come in and, sometimes head coaches can't turn teams around in a day. It takes a while. And this is similar, only it's bigger, right? They're having to deal with hundreds and hundreds of people, sometimes thousands, instead of, 20 or 30. And you have to remember that, for Otmar Szafneur, what he had to do at Force India, and when they went into administration, and then Lawrence Stroll rescued them from that, and him and Bob Fernley and Andrew Green and that entire team, he got them working, and he got that team to really just punch well above their weight level in the constructor standings, even when their doors were closing. Like, for those of you who are kind of new to Formula One, I mean, like, to go back a ways, I mean, this is a team at Force India at the time, their doors were shutting, and they had no money to keep the lights on, to pay their employees, but yet they were able to produce a solid car and keep the team unified and joined. And they were able to crack out some, very impressive performances. And, a big part of that is because of what Otmar does, right? What he does with the team. And I think that speaks volumes when you're in that stressful situation. But I guess it's difficult, when your vision and what that of your boss's vision don't really align. Famine will be the intern. So Bruno Famine will be the interim team principal to go along, with his many other duties that I had mentioned earlier, while Julian Rouse, who is the head of the driver academy, will move to the interim sporting director role. Rumor is that former boss Mattia Binotto will take over, once his Ferrari gardening leave has ended. But Bruno Famine's media availability on Friday was a little weird. He didn't really answer a lot of these questions. He didn't answer really that many questions at all. It was kind of odd. Didn't really give us too much to go on. And I think at the end of the day, Alpine just thought that they may have reached a peak in terms of how far they could go with this team personnel who were in their place, and to take that next step, they needed to restructure. And I think that's kind of what maybe where Alpine was coming from. Maybe they saw the team like, hey, with what we've got put in place, maybe all we're good for is a P4 in a constructor standings, or battling for a P6, and we can't level up, so we need to clean house a bit to bring in some fresh perspective to help us level up, to help us get back to those championship winning ways. But this is a massive move for this team. Like when I said clean slate, guys. Like, they've removed like a lot of their senior and very experienced personnel at the top of this team, and at the moment, just no legit replacements for them at the moment. I'm sure there's going to be some other things coming down the pipeline, but boy, that's a big. It's big to let those individuals let go. Really is. So when I was at the Williams factory a few weeks ago in the UK, got to spend some time with James Vowles. A lot of us did. Team principal of Williams, James Vowles, and he had hinted at the possibility of an addition to the team that was going to be a big name. And I was like super excited. I wanted to know, like, okay, well, come on, you can't just tell us that, and then you can't tell us that and not explain, who. And it was someone who he had been speaking with for quite some time. And lo and behold, it was Pat Fry. So Pat Fry leaving Alpine, walking his way down the paddock now towards Williams, where he will start work on November 1st. He'll join the team in that chief technical officer role. Loads of experience, Pat Fry, in F1 and working for such teams like McLaren and Ferrari and Renault and Alpine, and now we'll move down the paddock, like I had mentioned, to join Williams. Great story. I mean, this is a really nice hire by Vowles, and in fact, I think it's his first real big hire since taking over at the Williams team. Really impressive move by him. I think that's going to help them a lot. I mean, the thing with Williams obviously is infrastructure, right? They need to get that CapEx, like Ian Parks and I had spoke about on our last podcast that we posted on Thursday. We were speaking of that CapEx, and Ian described it very, very well, how that works, and essentially just trying to get more out of CapEx. So, Vowles can go and spend that on this old infrastructure that's at Williams and really try to turn their factory around so they can get this team, back to its glory days, so to speak. But really like what he's doing at that team at the moment. Seeing Doralton and them having that understanding, they're invested, right? Like Doralton has really understood what it's going to take to get Williams, back up to the sharper end of the grid. And it's great to see them investing money. James is, I sat in on a number of press conferences with James Vowles and never heard him once complain about not having the money to go and spend on things. So yeah, really excited for Williams to get Pat Fry. Obviously it's going to take some time for him to get integrated and get up to speed and sort of put his stamp on that side of the team. But that's a really exciting hire for them. Thanks very much, everybody, for watching and listening. Really appreciate it. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write a review, as it really helps us grow this show. You can also watch us on YouTube, and I'll be back on Sunday with more Nailing the Apex. You can also follow me at Tim Hauraney, and we'll talk to you all later.